Please stay in and give us the money. There are people dying now, so give me the money.
Yes, that's, of course, a cleaned-up version of the mantra that Bob Geldof ran with and didn't let go in the early 80s. There's some famous footage of him on live TV talking about give us the... and then there's a four-lettered profanity that's thrown in there. There was the moment when he confronted Mrs. Thatcher. But Mrs. Thatcher, give us the money. All of that, and it was constant. And, of course, Bob Geldof really, frankly, as I remember, along with Blue Peter, Michael Burke and Bob Geldof, would that be fair to say that in terms of bringing a story of utter devastation to the minds and to the doorstep of this country, that between those three, they all did an incredible job, and Blue Peter bringing this to a younger audience, and Michael Burke bringing this to a news audience, and Bob Geldof bringing it to everyone through his sheer will and determination to take that bone and not let go at any point, and to look incredulous and angry and upset and miffed and destroyed and ashamed and all of those things. And what happened, of course, and what followed was just incredible. And Live Aid was born, and all that followed from that, and the millions that were raised around the world, it was just extraordinary. You go down into the history books, not just musically, but otherwise, in terms of what happened there. And it's interesting, isn't it? Did we follow Hands Up seriously? Did we really follow the Ethiopian story as to what was happening subsequently? Could you confidently talk about what you thought was going on 10 years after, in 1994, when Blair took office? Were you aware of the state of the Ethiopian economy and what was going on there in 1997? 0345 6060 973. Well, this is the frankly devastating news that 30 years after Bob Geldof wanted our money, the same devastation is blighting Ethiopia again. The UK government are already pledging a package in total of about £55 million, a straight 30 million, which will be aid-based. They're going to give that money straight away. A prolonged drought means that more than 18 million people will need urgent relief in the next year, according to the Department for International Development. 18 million people. Nearly a third of the population of this country, that kind of size. Half of the cash earmarked for the UN's World Food Programme to supply emergency food to around 1.9 million people. 14 million will go to a pooled fund that can be accessed by UN agencies and NGOs, that's non-government agencies, organisations rather, providing emergency water and healthcare. The funding was announced by Nick Hurd, the new International Development Minister, who travelled to Ethiopia in December on his first foreign trip. Hurd visited a health clinic in the north of the country. He said the number of mothers and children who'd squeezed into the rooms demonstrated the severity of the crisis, as well as the effectiveness of services supported by British aid. The scale of this is very big, and almost certainly too big for the domestic systems the government has set up in a very impressive way since learning all of the lessons of the drought in the past. So here's how I'm reading this, and tell me if I've got this wrong. If you have some experience of Ethiopia, whether you are a citizen, former citizen of that country, or still that is your nationality, whether you've travelled there in a sort of an NGO capacity, in a charitable capacity, in some sort. The way I'm reading this is that Ethiopia is a little better equipped to deal with the famine this time. The famine differs slightly. There are meteorological reasons as to why this devastation has come around, and that can be looked at in a way that, although that was an element before, the political reasons why many were starving are not quite as pronounced this time as last time. This is how I'm understanding it. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the bit I find more fascinating, the first time I was really aware, and I was a kid when this was happening, the first time I was really aware of the discussions of does charity begin at home was about this. Because despite the millions and billions that were raised around the world, it also had a parallel narrative, if you remember. And that was people who felt that it was wrong to throw money at this problem. and we were tackling this the wrong way. And after all, we've got our own problems. I don't think there is a cause or a charity or an event that has become more totemic when it comes to the charity debate than what happened with Ethiopia in 1984. That sort of still stands. When people think of giving money abroad, this goes to the beating heart, if you like, of international aid. This goes right there. I think most people, if you were asked, 100 people, give an example of where international aid money goes, press your buzzer, Ethiopia. I think that would be people's educated guess in that respect. So it sort of has become this standout cause, despite how Ethiopia has got on the previous 30 years. But here we are again. And those evil Tories, as we were talking about in the last hour, have pledged a package in total of £55 billion to go towards what is happening there. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on this. Because frankly, if anyone says we have our own problems, and sort of even alludes to the fact that our own problems are anywhere near what is going on in Ethiopia, then you have my permission to scream as loud as you can about half a millimetre from their face. Because anybody that says that doesn't know what they're talking about. There's nobody starving in this country in the way that people will be starving in Ethiopia. There is nobody in this country that is experiencing the specific issues and the collective ones that people will be experiencing in Ethiopia. There is absolutely nothing happening here, nothing to see here, Gov, when it comes to poverty and devastation that we will see in Ethiopia. 18 million people could die. 18 million people. We don't have that situation in this country. But why am I already sensing that there is a slow-burning body of opinion that is kind of resenting, rolling its eyes, and sort of about to lament, here we go again? 0345 6060 973. Zalalam in Notting Hill, hello.
Hello there, Ian.
Hi.
How are you?
Very well, sir. What are your thoughts?
Wishing a Merry Christmas to all your listeners. I'm compelled to call about the subject that you're talking about.
Yep.
I'm of originally Ethiopian descent, living in the UK.
Yep.
So, the subject that we're talking about, as you said, is you get the sense of deja vu, okay?
Yep.
By the way, this is what's widely publicized now. Otherwise, every 5 years or every 7 years or so, there is famine and problems in Ethiopia. This is 30 years after, as you mentioned, Bob Geldof. As much as there is an environmental problem, okay, but the main problem for drought to be turned into famine in Ethiopian case is mainly misled and failed government policy.
Okay.
The government is, as we know it, it's a brutal, corrupt regime, a failed state who does not serve the people. It is there to serve the cronies of its own people. It's part of like ethnic apartheid, okay? Don't forget, the people who are in power today are people who are defrauded Geldof, selling him a bag of sand, pretending to be a bag of wheat. And their treasurer have come out in public and said that is how we tricked the West and got 20 million pounds out of their hand.
But whatever,
these are exactly the same people.
But whatever was happening there, and I think many of us did have a suspicion, not every buck that was sent that way was necessarily spent wisely. But as we sit here today, Ethiopia is one of Africa's success stories, of course, with a growing economy.
Well, that is another sort of myth which needs to be demystified, okay? 7, 10, 8 or 10 years growing at a rate of double digits, the fastest growing in the world, yet it can't even stand rain failure for one season. How does that add up?
Well, how do you the UK is a very rich economy, but people's houses still get blown away in a rainstorm.
Yeah, but if you are growing at that rate. Well, let me tell you
But
why.
you know what?
The main reason
as
is
somebody,
the land policy.
Okay,
Look,
as
the
somebody,
land policy in that country does not in any way support for the land is owned by the state.
but if you have a failed harvest, the term failed harvest in Ethiopian parlance, of course, is a much more devastating phrase than in European parlance.
Absolutely.
And of course, you've then
that.
got the weather pattern that is working against the country as well.
Indeed, we all understand that, but you have to have a food security to help you sort of overcome rain failures for one season or two if you are successful. And the other reason is a land as big as the size of Belgium has been sold out to lowest bidders in Ethiopia, okay, for like the Saudis and all that, who are harvesting food and taking it for their own food security, while the people who used to be on that land have now become basically landless and
All right.
are now beggars and poor people starving and looking for aid.
Listen, it's a very powerful call to begin this with, and I'm really grateful that you would call us, and you clearly speak from experience, and I think you've probably said quite a lot of things there that maybe we all sort of secretly knew and wondered and scratched our head about over the years, and still consider that there are elements within the Ethiopian governmental system where all is not right. However, that doesn't, of course, alter the brutal reality that there is a famine, and there is a drought, and there is starvation, and there is a failed harvest, and there is a perfect storm, to coin the phrase, in terms of the weather, the El Nino weather pattern that has caused all of this. So regardless of what we think about Ethiopian politicians, those that are running it, what they might have done, dodgy deals, brown envelopes, flogging stuff off to the Saudis, etc., I think we get all of that. None of that helps 18 million people who are going to starve. And no one in this country has got a problem like somebody has in Ethiopia when they can't actually eat. There's nowhere to get the food. It's not the food's over there and you can say, look, there's the food. Over here, we can talk about people struggling. Nobody is struggling on that level. 0345 6060 973. So why is there still a sense that some people will be very cynical about a kind of, if you like, a live aid, an Ethiopian famine, part 2? What's your problem? 0345 6060 973. You're listening to Ian Collins. It's late nights on LB. We often talk about foreign aid. We often talk about international development funds. And I think the sort of Ethiopian famine goes straight to the centre of our minds and our thought processes when we think about money going abroad. Because in recent history, 30 years ago, that, of course, is what we all conjure up as being the biggest international effort to assist another country when it came to crucial aid that we'd seen in our lifetimes. Nothing has matched it since, and maybe until now, dare I say, because a famine is already sniffing its way around Ethiopia, and it's likely to bite even more over the coming weeks. They need help. The government is in a better position than they were before, and yet the charity begins at home mantra is alive and well. Why, when we have nothing like they have there in terms of devastation, blighting your existence? Are we bothered about sending a few quid to Ethiopia? I know you're not that... Don't go away, Johannes, with you in a second. Mark in Liverpool, you're not that happy about this, Mark.
Hello, Ian, mate, you all right?
I'm all right. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I haven't spoke to you for ages, mate. Are you listening? What I'm going to come out with tonight is that absurd, but it's actually quite brilliant. But it's the only solution that I can come up with.
Do you know what?
And this is what...
I'm all ears on this.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
This is what it's got to be. We've got to make a new state. And we've got to go to these countries, right, and say, listen, we are going to alleviate your people's problems from you. And we're going to take a bit of ground from each of you, and we're going to build a new state. And all our money, all from around the world, we're going to pump in, and we're going to make a new state for these people to live. Now, okay, people might say, well, if you're not good, you've got your own values, they're not our values, but that's how it's going to have to be. If we can turn all that ground to minerals and for scran for us, we can turn it down for them. So we have a little bit of land of 6 different countries, make one new state, and build a whole new country for them to live.
So that's the way we do it, and we use the money we would have put towards food to simply build another place.
A whole new society.
Why do you suspect no one's come up with that? On the face of it, it's so crazy, it sounds workable.
Well, I
it sounds brilliant.
Well, why isn't it? They can build it themselves. They can get it, we'll sort them. They can build all their own food, get all their own agriculture done. We'll make a new state. Well, it's obvious, isn't it?
Well, it's obvious when you put it like that. And Africa is a huge continent with some very powerful nations within it. Why could you not? So you'd have to, within a period of time, take all of those people and just start a new place where famine cannot bite because the conditions don't allow it. That's, I assume, what you're saying, Mark.
Yeah, and all the brilliance of all the people, especially the Africans, I'm telling you, all the people who study around the world from these countries that want to go back and give all their skills to this new vision and for this people to live, and we'll sort it and box it for everyone to live a happy... See, when I thought with the refugee crisis, I thought, well, wait a minute. All right, it might take us policing it, and people might turn around and say, well, who are you to police it? You're at the start of the trouble anyway.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, all I'm bothered about is poor people managing to feed, not giving them a plaster for a big boil. So let's build them a new world. Let's build them a new country, mate. And again, somebody who has, and I'm sure your knowledge on this is greater than mine, Mark, but clearly just building a new country is not on the current agenda. No, well, we're going to have to go in and police it, aren't we? We're going to have to say to these countries, listen, this is how it is. And unfortunately, we're going to have to take this part of the land, we're going to have to take this, and this is under our control. We're going to box it, we're going to alleviate the problem off you. You've got enough on your plate by sorting your own economy and getting yourselves running to look after yourselves. So we're going to sort it for you, and surely to God you'd want us to, because it's your own people. And soon enough, these are going to be running their own economy, they're going to be running their own stuff, and this is going to be a new vision that's probably going to put us to bed. And in 40 years, 100 years, we'll be learning from them.
You see, what I meant to do with a call like yours, Mark, is just obviously rip it apart and say you're talking nonsense. But in fact, what you've just said, on the face of it, unless there are really good geographical, environmental... I mean, there will certainly be some political and economic, but geographical, environmental reasons why that can't happen. I don't know, but it does sound logical that you would get the collective might of all the strong African nations. And thank you, Mark, for that. I often wonder where South Africa are in many of these discussions. You appear to be largely impotent on issues relating to their own continent. And I think what's happening at the moment in the north is kind of interesting, that it almost is not part of the news agenda in the south. 0345 6060 973. Sounds all rather simplistic. Is there a reason why you couldn't do that? Build another country. There is more spare land mass there than most other places on the planet. The collective brains, the might, the charitable component that's required, those that are going to build and put it together. Why could you not essentially build a huge town, a country, that would look after those people who are suffering? Johannes in Bermondsey, hello.
Hi, and Merry Christmas. How you doing, mate?
And very well, sir. What are your thoughts?
Listen, mate, the problem is a multitude of issues, but the primary problem is obviously bad government.
Yeah.
And the first of all, I mean, I would like to say thank you for the British government and the British people to generously donate this money. But unfortunately, this money, I don't think or believe is going to reach to the right people.
That's the problem, isn't it?
But, yes, and the other thing is, what is the solution? Drought in Ethiopia is always, we hear that. Since I was born, I mean, I'm Ethiopian. Since I was born, that's what I heard all the time, drought in Ethiopia. It can be managed.
How?
There's no doubt. We can manage that. But the only thing is, at the moment, the government in power is a minority government imposed by the West on Ethiopian people. The solution, before they donate this money to the government, why the British government don't talk to us? there's over 50,000 Ethiopians reside in the UK, intellectual Ethiopians.
Mm-hmm.
They could have consulted with us. We will tell them the truth, how they can spend the money and how the money can reach to the people. Unfortunately, they don't consult with us. They don't even bother to talk to us. We are the first-hand witness. We know how the money can reach to the people. We can tell them. But the government won't tell them the truth. Unfortunately, they've got ears for the government, not for us. This is the problem, Ian.
The government are supposedly in a better position than they were 30 years ago to deal with this, but we are told, and this is why I wanted to open up the phone lines on this, we're told that there's nothing the government can do about a drought. There's nothing the government can do about a harvest that simply hasn't happened.
There is a lot of things they can do. First of all, the government and the people do not trust each other. No Ethiopian will tell you they trust this government. And also the government do not trust the people. Ian, 2 weeks ago, even now as I speak, there is a genocide in Oromia region because people protest. The government is going to take away their land from the poor farmers by the name of the master plan, expanding the city, development and this and that.
Yep.
But you can't... Well, development is a good thing for the country. But if you develop the 1% of elite and kill the 99% of
But I hear where you're coming from, but supposedly those days are kind of gone, and the way that international development now works is that they can make sure that money is focused in the right area. David in Greenwich, you're not satisfied, David, that this is necessarily a good thing to stick our hands in our pockets?
I never said that. Hello? Still there?
Yeah.
Sorry, what's your name? Sorry.
My name is Ian. You called me, sir.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, you work in London, don't you? Oh, I assume you work in London.
Yes. Don't live here, but yes.
No, but I mean, you probably come out from work. How many people do you see sleeping in doorways?
Between here and Charing Cross,
yes,
I would probably see 30 people.
Well, the point is I'm making. I mean, surely we should be looking after our own people. You know.
I think the reason those people are in that position is very different to the reason why Ethiopians are in that their position.
But why should we be interested in that? Charity begins at home.
Why does it begin at home?
Well, that's my belief.
Okay. Does it not start where it's most needed?
Charity begins at home. Look,
where's home? Is home Greenwich?
Don't to me. Well, I was brought up in an orphanage, right? Till I was 18.
Yeah.
I've always looked after my children.
Sure.
Made sure they was okay. And you go around London, people living on the street. They can't get a house, they can't get food. I mean, surely we should be looking after our own people.
Well, listen, David, the sentiment of what you say, looking after our own people, is absolutely bang on. When you start to compare it, then I don't know where you draw that line, because there are all sorts of other lines we could draw. We could say that if you're in Greenwich, we don't give money to Greenwich. If we're in Lewisham, because that's another place. Lewisham is home, etc. But I take your point, and you're not alone in that view, and I'm intrigued, and I did ask whether that view does still exist in 2015, and it does. 0345 6060973. More of your calls coming in on this. Surely Ethiopia need it more than us.
Late Nights with Ian Collins on LBC.
Anything wrong with sending cash to Africa? There won't be snow at Christmas time, and of course we know that message. Bob Geldof told us about it. Back in 84, Live Aid, Ethiopia, the famine, it's back. Do you want to send a few quid in that direction? If not, why not? Patrick, Dublin. Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
Definitely not, Ian. The continent of Africa, which consists of 42 countries, is a basket case a bottomless pit. So most of this money, at best 20% of it, gets to where it's supposed to go. With the rest gets lost on corrupt regimes and administration, etc. Now, some present and forecasted demographics of Africa, Ian, currently population of Africa 1.1 billion. By 2050, it's estimated to double to 2 billion, and by 2100, 4 billion. Now, in a lot of these countries that people are starving, they're continuing to have huge families. Now, in China, okay, it was a bit naughty a few years ago. They introduced a one-child policy. I think they should do the same thing in Africa. If they're going to send money, which is crazy anyway, what they should be sending really is food parcels or the equivalent and contraceptives. Because until these people get a sexual practices that are responsible sexual activity, procreating en masse, and expecting the West to continually pick up the tab is ludicrous.
I think you might be misunderstanding why people might procreate, and that's really just to carry on your family so that you don't die out.
But I understand that.
It's not a case of saying, oh, we fancy a little bouncing baby boy, we'll go down to Mothercare, get him some nice bits. This is about believing that your entire existence is going to...
Well, Ian, if you have children and
you're... going to be eradicated.
Yeah, but if you have children, or if you cannot provide for them, what is the logic in bringing children into the world en masse that are starving?
Because your instinctive hope is that you're able to continue you may not survive, but maybe somebody will look after your kids who can survive, and your heritage is then protected, your lineage is protected, and you can live through those children going forward. That's the thinking behind it. I think sending a box of rubber johnnies won't necessarily sort it out. Thanks, Patrick. Some in Hackney, hello.
Hello, Ian. How are you doing, mate?
Very well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, basically it's simple. You don't have, don't spoon feed them, help them to help themselves. You cannot give someone a fish. If you keep giving him fish, you need to teach him to fish, how to fish. So
sure, that's true. Yeah, but of course, this isn't money. Nobody is just going to hand over a big cheque to the Ethiopian government.
Yeah, but you are making them not to work and help them. Aid will corrupt you. Okay? There is next door, there is Eritrea, a country which there is no aid organization, no NGO, the same geographical place. There is no starvation because the government declared we don't need aid. So the people are starting to work and they're starting to feed themselves.
But this is but this is a very, this is a growing economy, Ethiopia. It's one of the greatest African success stories in the last decade. It's been doing rather well, but even a growing economy cannot fight the elements, and if there's a drought and a set of weather conditions that wreck the place, what do?
That is not the reality on the ground. That is the propaganda of the government. It's still what you are telling me, the propaganda of the government. The government is telling people are starving, and he's telling us, yes, is no war, is peace, right, is wrong. And look, at this particular time, as I am speaking now, the government is killing, in daylight, protests. Over 100 students died because of the land. Did you broadcast it, or did you see it on BBC? Did you see it on any or Adesa? You don't see that.
All right, so you think there is more of a story that needs to be told. Some, thank you very much indeed for that. And I think your point about teaching people the skills that are needed, I know that some international development programs do suggest that that is exactly what they've been doing. But of course, I guess it's slowly in these sort of approaches. The money does usually go to United Nations food funds and other charitable organisations that have this thing generally worked out so that you don't just hand over a big cheque to a dicey dictator who then goes and buys himself a Bentley. John in Paddington. Hello, John.
Good evening and Merry Christmas to you.
And to you too, sir. What are your thoughts?
Okay, now it's a much bigger problem here. The whole region is running out of water. And these droughts, of course, are due to climate change, like it or not. Now, the problem is, we have had these problems, but most of the droughts are caused by politics, and so was the 74 drought and the 84 drought. It's to do with conflict within Ethiopia.
The drought surely isn't caused by politics, but the response to the drought.
Yeah, I mean, the consequences.
Yeah, okay.
And what I'm trying to say is, like, you got the whole thing in Yemen. Yemen is running out of water. Somalia is a nutcase and whatever. And Eritrea is not in a good way neither. But politically, this is the thing, is the government and the people you spoke to before, again with the man who said about grain being grown in Ethiopia for Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia stopped growing grain because they haven't got enough water. Problem is that human rights here. Now, I don't mind money going to desperate people when we got it, and we do have it, but they should come with concessions. And one of them should be, there should be the open democracy. Now, they are doing well economically. They even got a film industry in Ethiopia. And you talk about South Africa. South Africa isn't the solution to every country in
It doesn't seem to be the solution to any African problem at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and I'm looking at a map of Ethiopia, as we see, and see all the countries around it.
Yeah.
Problem being is that we have this every 10, 20, 30 years, we have this thing happening in Ethiopia. Now, either there is going to be a political will in Ethiopia to change that, or we're just going to be shelling out money every 10 years.
Of course, but it's interesting because you know, you're looking at a map there right now, so you'll know the proximity of Eritrea and Somalia in this story. What was going on in Eritrea for years, we virtually heard nothing about, which is extraordinary. And, of course, Somalia have had their own famines as well, with thousands of people who've lost their lives. And, again, we've never heard, we never seem to hear quite as much about that as well. So why do you think what goes on in Ethiopia specifically seems to whet the appetite of Western governments as distinct from some of those other countries?
Because they're more developed, to be quite frank. The whole Eritrean thing, you know, you've got the whole thing down in Calais. Eritreans are, you know, they're leaving that country in the droves because of the government.
Yep.
Somali because of war and everything else. And we might have the same problem with Ethiopia. But the Ethiopia is more stable. Now, it's more in our interest to keep that stability going. But, you know, you've got a lot of restrictions there on journalism, on freedom of right, freedom of speech, blah, blah, blah. And so these are the things that we should be pressing them on. And, you know, instead of like saying, oh, show a man how to fish, they know how to fish. They've been there thousands of years. This is one of the most oldest civilizations on Earth.
I think he was using that as a metaphor.
Yeah, but, you know, these are not, you know, I've never met not a stupid Ethiopian. You know what I mean?
No, but it's fair to say that if you are in a country whose political structure has been unstable, to put it rather generously, over many, many decades, then lessons that need to be learnt in terms of protecting the future stability of your country could be more useful than just sending somebody a bag of rice or some money.
Yeah, and that's where the EU should come into it, because now, you know, if they want development, they should have certain things like freedom of speech and democracy. And that's my point. I don't have an issue with them getting the money, but I do have an issue with them. They're thinking that they can just take it and not do anything within their own structure and their own society.
Are you more satisfied, though, that the UN channels and many of the food programme and charitable channels are slightly more geared up to address the very concern you have than they were maybe 30 years ago?
Yeah, you can see why. I mean, 30 years ago we had a Cold War, and they were in, you know, they were on the Soviet side, blah, blah, blah. Now it's different. Africa is developing. Your man was talking about 41 countries. There's 51 countries in Africa. And you're right, Ethiopia is one of their success stories. And there are positive things going on in Ethiopia. But for them to have then a drought and then to turn to the West and say we can, you know, to solve it, it's much more complex than that. And I would rather that we give aid on a long-term thing and a long-term development of their government.
All right, listen, great point, great call. John, thank you, sir, for that. 0345 6060 973. Do you concur with what John was saying there? I'll talk to Barry in just a second. D in Dartford says, please tell the ignorant gentleman that the reason why many impoverished Africans have many children is because it is culture for these children to look after them in their old age. There is no cushy pension pot, government social care or benefit system to fall back on in Africa. So, as we are so fortunate to have in this country and across Europe. That's right. It's not as if these people are nipping down. There's no kind of Ethiopian version of Benefit Street where you'd be able to see folk look what they're up to Oh, look, they've got a house made of flat-screen TVs and bags of rice given by the Blue Peter viewers. They're taking the... That doesn't exist. And as I think, Dee, you're absolutely right, which feeds into the point that I was making. It's also about the survival of your own race, aside from anything else. But I think the point you make is just as valid as well, that there's also that whole issue of culturally, you need people to look after you as a group that is sensing it will be weaker than it currently is in old age if it gets to old age. Back with you on the phones. Tanya is in Ripley. Hi, Tanya.
Hi, good evening, Ian.
Good evening to you.
I've been to Ethiopia.
Okay.
It is the most fascinating country. It was, of course, originally Abyssinia, where most of the Bible started. When we were there, we were told by a gentleman that during the last famine, the government exaggerated the number of people that was affected by it. Excuse me, in order to get more money from other countries. But the logistical problem there is that the government own all the land, and the people are allowed to farm on it, and they are given the land in perpetuity, so that we were talking about having large families. They don't have large families, but they do have families because they're allowed to farm this land, as long as the families go on. The problem is, if they leave the land, they were trying to encourage the farmers from the affected countries, but once they leave that land, it's taken over again by the government, and they can't get back onto it, which is why they didn't want to come away from the affected areas and go.
Oh, and we just lost Tanya there. If we could get her back, that would be fabulous, because her line just drifted off. Let me go to Galbed before we try and get Tanya back. Galbed, hello, in Harrow.
Hi.
Hi.
Ian, hi. First, let me apologize in advance for my poor English, but what I would like to say here is, why is the name Ethiopia became synonymous with hunger and starvation?
Well, so why did Ethiopia become a synonym for hunger and starvation? Because of the 84 famine, I guess.
Yes, I mean, what we are talking about here is one of the oldest civilization on the planet.
Of course.
And Ethiopians are. I myself am from Somalia. The Ethiopians are very beautiful people, well educated and hardworking. What I would like to, I would like to say, just let us leave them alone. The government is capable of coming out of this.
So why are the... I mean, I hear what you're saying, but why are the United Nations suggesting, and this all comes from the UN, suggesting that this kind of money is needed, or this help is clearly needed?
Well, indeed, the money is needed, but the question is, will the money reach the intended?
So are you saying you've got to be cruel to be kind?
No. I'm not trying to be cruel, but what I'm trying to say is that there is a uprising going at the moment in the Oromo region, and I think the government is trying to divert the attention and just blowing this thing out of proportion.
So the government of Ethiopia, or this country, sorry, I missed your point.
I think the government of Ethiopia, at the moment, there's trouble going on in the Oromo region.
Okay. So you're saying you don't believe there's a drought or a famine?
There might be up to a certain extent, but I think the government is trying to divert the attention.
Yeah.
This is what I
yeah,
think.
Well, I mean, listen, Galbert, I'm happy to take your point, and thank you for making it. But I do wonder whether the United Nations and inspectors and people that go in and look at all of this, and charitable workers and those that work in these kind of areas, would be able to simply would not see for themselves exactly what is going on there, and I think they probably have. We've got Tanya back. Tanya, you got cut off in your prime there.
Yes, I did indeed. Not the way. I was going to say also. You're talking about the Eritreans. The Ethiopians have massive camps for Eritreans who escape from Eritrea. So they have this extra massive problem with refugees, and these camps are almost like towns in themselves. That they've got every facility there, and from what we saw, that they're very well organised. So that is an added problem for the Ethiopians. And the other thing is travelling around there. Food is a problem. You can only eat the food that is seasonal. So the only meal that they tend to have sort of a particular meal, which is where you get it all the time. The only time we had anything remotely edible was at by the Blue Nile, where you get the fish comes from the river. Apart from that, apart from in the international hotels in Addis Ababa, where everything is on the menu. There you can have anything you want. The food is very, very restricted there. And so obviously farming is the most important thing.
Of course it is. Well, our last caller was suggesting, Tanya, that there's something, all is not right here, and the Ethiopian government are playing this sort of Svengali role, and there's wool being pulled over our eyes in the West. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, that this was indicated to us when we were there talking to this gentleman, that the Ethiopian government is corrupt, and that I can't obviously say now what's going on. And as you said, quite rightly, people go in there to
Sure.
see exactly what is going on. But I think there was a lot of deception during the last episode. I mean, it's most interesting there that the people who live in houses, they have different types. They have some that have corrugated roofs and some that are sort of thatched. But next to the houses are the sort of buyers or sort of homes for the animals. They look after their animals very, very well, because they don't have anything mechanical there. They don't have cars. All they have is donkeys pulling carts to help them. But you would think that because they are so limited on their food, that their animals would be mistreated. But in fact, their animals are all extremely healthy, and they do look after the animals. And so obviously, if they're in a drought situation, they can't put by food for the animals for the following season. But I don't think because there are different areas there, I don't think all the areas are under drought, and it would be interesting to know exactly what is going on there before one gives one's money to it.
Indeed, I think you're spot on, but of course we do these things by instinct, don't we? And we see that there's a crisis, and we know that 18 million people are at threat, and somebody says, can you put a few quid into this bucket? And you think, well, yeah, all right, I will. And we don't always, I mean, the picture is, you beautifully described your experience and your thoughts, but I guess the picture is probably so complicated if you begin to look even deeper into this, and that's what makes it tricky. And maybe we give money almost as an insurance policy, Tanya, just in case. Even if it's wrong, we've only given a couple of quid each and we can afford it. So,
but it's into a hole with a bucket with a hole in it, isn't it?
That's the problem, isn't it? And are we kind of being fooled into that? Tanya, great call, and again, thank you. You speak from a qualified view, having been there. I really appreciate your time on air. Thank you for that. Barry is in Croydon. Barry, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, good evening.
Hi.
Thank you once more, at least for giving we ordinary Africans to express our.
That's a pleasure, sir. Not a problem at all. It's clearly
normally these opportunities.
Whereabouts are you from in Africa?
Yeah, I'm from Sierra Leone. Actually, last year I was on this show again when the Ebola issue came up.
All right.
From Sierra Leone, and when Bob Geldof tried to revive his song, Do They Know It's Christmas Time Again, when he was basically ridiculed.
The Ebola story. Yeah, that's right.
Yes, right. So the idea of this aid thing, which normally the British government try to most of the time explain to taxpayers that we are helping, especially in the case of Africa, pouring their millions or billions of pounds in aid money, which in fact, to be honest with you, no African can definitely confirm that it has made any difference in their life. No African can tell you that. Absolutely, I'm pretty sure.
Do you tell me this, Barry, just because I know we're short of time. When you look at, I know it's not your country, Ethiopia, but when you look at, as an African, when you look at Ethiopia, do you see instinctively a corrupt government?
Definitely. It's not only Ethiopian government. It's, these people benefit from this, rush to send money. They benefit from it. It's no doubt about it.
Who benefits? Argument. The government or the people?
The government, of course.
Okay.
Corrupt. You have.
I'm sure, but what if?
They are just waiting.
So you're not satisfied. NGOs. You're not satisfied that the United Nations are able to administer and manage these funds correctly?
The problem is most of these UN officials, they have no idea about these countries. They have no idea about the structure. Some of them are Westerners. They have no idea.
All right.
In ministries, these people tell them what to do, and they follow suit.
Listen, it won't be the last time I think we visit this one. Barry, I'm grateful for your call, sir. We finished because we hit the clock. Sorry if we didn't get around to your point.